breaking down all the plays and getting you in the action. We've got you covered all season long. Welcome to the BCSN Nation podcast, powered by Marco's Pizza.
Boom. If you hear that music, you know what time it is. It is time for the latest edition for the BCSN Nation podcast to drop. It is February 22nd, 2023, episode 26. I am Justin Feldkamp alongside Rhett Boyd. All high school hoops all the time here on the podcast. We are ready for the postseason, both on the girls' side and now on the boys' side. All right, Rhett, it is that time of the year where it is win or it is go home.
It is, and that's right. And I said this on Game Day Nation on Friday night. It's like, for players and coaches, embrace every second that you have. Starting probably yesterday when you started practicing, for this week is because your season's going to come to an abrupt halt. And it can be after 32 minutes, and it's a gut punch, especially for seniors when you'll never put that jersey on again. You will never play with your buddies that you grew up with ever again. Even if you're fortunate to play at the next level, it's just different than playing with the kids you've grown up with. So embrace, every practice, everything you're doing together as a unit, and go out and lay it on the line and leave no doubt. Because if you advance, it's great. If you're not, it's like I said, it's a gut punch.
Yes, it is. This is the BCSN Nation podcast powered by Marco's Pizza. Each and every Wednesday at 3 o'clock, a new episode of the podcast drops on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and on bcsnnation.com/podcast. All of our social media handles at BCSN Sports, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. All right, let's get right into it on the boys' side. In addition to the top 10 being revealed, we've talked about it in successive podcasts here, Rhett. We had the 30. Now we're going to go down to 10 this coming Friday, February 24th, during Game Day Nation and Game Day Nation Overtime. The top 10 boys and girls on each side deemed first team all BCSN watch list candidates, and then we'll narrow it down to the final 5 on Friday, March 10th. And that has been a process. We've had a lot of fun, a lot of debate, a lot of feedback, a lot of social media banter, but a lot of coaches have given us a lot of good feedback and information as to who they believe, in conjunction with the two of us, Dion Thompson, and other BCSN on-air talents, play-by-play announcers, and color analysts.
Yeah, and I think even some of the guys, when hey, what do you think? What do you think? And you get in some big time debates about it, and you know what? And you respectfully appreciate the other side's point of view. It's like, I never looked at it that way before, things of that nature. And it's a fun list. You're always, if it's 10, number 11 and 12 easily probably could have made the top 10. And when you get down to 5, number 6 or 7 easily could have been, in that top 5. And that's what a list is.
Exactly. That is what a list is.
That's what a list is. And unfortunately, there is a cut line, and with a lot of different opinions, you just got to make a final call. But we have great players in this area on both sides, boys and girls. It's splitting hairs. It really is by the 100%. End of it, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. All right, so we got brackets, we got standings, we got projections, we got the rundown here, state rankings, all the sheets of paper that we'll talk about here in the next few minutes on the BCSN Nation podcast powered by Marco's Pizza. Let's start in the Three Rivers Athletic Conference on the boys' side, Rhett. We saw Whitmer and Central co-champions, and then I want to talk a little bit about an overall season recap and how we maybe thought it would play out. Did it play out how we thought back in November or December?
I think going into it, Whitmer and Central were indeed picked near the top, coming into the season, and they lived up to that billing. And I think both teams going through their non-league and league schedule, they've tested each other. They've had some big wins, and they've dropped some games that maybe, you thought maybe they could have won. And I think when you go through the TRAC, it just battle tests you. It really shows you what you're good at. It really shows you what you need to get better at. And I think both teams have done that throughout the season. I do think when you look, as you go through the league, like Findlay ended up 3rd. I think that's maybe surprised some people with the graduation they had with Max Roth company. But Jake Bishop really, he averaged 18 a game last year, with Max Ruoff by his side. It's like, okay, what's he going to do when he's the primary guy that you got to stop? And all he did was average 18, 19 points a game once again. So you give him a lot of credit. Will Cordanier really emerged off the JV team last year. He's been good. So I think they were a little bit of a surprise. And I think St. Francis, who is down in that probably that 6th or 7th spot. And we said this in one of the podcasts to start the year. They're going to be a lot better. But you maybe only jump maybe 1 or 2 spots in the standings, and that's what happened. They were significantly better than a year ago, but I think they'll maybe improve 1 or 2 positions within the league. It just shows how good the league was.
Yeah, from top to bottom, Central and Whitmer tied for first. Then we had Findlay, like you mentioned, Rhett. Then Lima Senior, St. John, St. Francis, Fremont Ross, and Clay from the top to the bottom in the Three Rivers Athletic Conference. So with Whitmer and Central Catholic, Whitmer Division I team, in all likelihood, they will face the winner of Bowser and Ashland and then likely win that game. And unless Southview can upset Start, we're going to have the Battle of Tremainsville Road in the district semifinals.
Round
and we were
2.
talking about this last week with Dion. There's 2 matchups in which I'm really looking forward to, in which a really, really, really good team is going to be eliminated very early in the tournament. If we do get that matchup, Whitmer and Start, one of those teams is going home, and then the other matchup is between Anthony Wayne and Findlay in a matchup that pits the TRAC against the NLL until next year when Findlay joins the NLL.
Yeah, and in that Whitmer Start matchup you mentioned first, Start was up 23 at the half on Whitmer in game 1, end up winning by 10. So it's like, yeah, Start is good enough. Stone Edwards, Romel, Hightower, they're good enough to get that 23-point lead. Then you saw Whitmer respond. They cut it to 10 and obviously ran out of time. That's 2 alphas going at it and competing at a high level. That's going to be a lot of fun to watch the second time around. And you mentioned Anthony Wayne and Findlay. Here, I have family members that live out in Anthony Wayne, and they're asking me what I think about this first round matchup, and I'm like, Findlay's really good. Really good. Talked about Jake Bishop and company. But I really like this Anthony Wayne team. I've liked them all year long, especially the way they responded after losing 6 games in a row. They won 9 of their last 10. They'd only lost the 1-point loss to Tiffin, who's the 2 seed. Here's the biggest question for me going in that game on Friday is emotionally, can Anthony Wayne regroup, come off of the high of winning 9 out of 10, winning the NLL championship in the last ball game of the year at home on senior night, all of that? Can you come off of that high, get reloaded and refocused in a couple of days of prep here going into a Findlay game where Findlay right now just knocked off Lima Senior, who is maybe the hottest team outside of Anthony Wayne, the hottest team after they knocked off Central and Whitmer. Findlay's up 24, ends up winning by double figures. They sweep Lima in the regular season. Findlay's that kind of team where they maybe were out of the track race a couple of weeks ago, but just keep plugging away, plug and play, playing really good basketball, focused, determined basketball, extremely well coached. So that's, to me, how does Anthony Wayne handle the success? They got to the mountaintop. They won the share of the NLL title. But now can you regroup and play an outstanding Findlay team who's really, really good? Yeah.
Anthony Wayne does have the NLL Player of the Year on their team. Parker Schofield recently named to that award, and they, along with Perrysburg, co-champs of the Northern Lakes League. And from top to bottom in that league, Perrysburg, A-Dub at the top, then Northview, Springfield, Bowling Green, Southview, Napoleon, and Maumee. So we did see some of those teams. No one went unblemished. 2 losses for both Perrysburg and Anthony Wayne. And as you take a look and forecast ahead for both of those teams, Perrysburg plays Clay, likely going to face the winner of potentially Springfield and St. Francis in the district semifinals. And then you have Anthony Wayne, who we have already mentioned, taking on Findlay from the get-go, a win there. And then whoever wins that Anthony Wayne-Findlay game would likely face the winner of St. John's and Tiffin Columbian. So top to bottom there in the NLL, we're going to touch upon the TRAC versus the NLL come our question of the week segment, Rhett. But any surprises? I thought it was just very similar to the TRAC. The expected teams at the top. Maybe Anthony Wayne, maybe not projected come back in November, but Perrysburg was the preseason favorite.
They were the preseason favorite. And, we saw them, they dropped the game to Springfield late in that ball game when they were in firm control. And then at home, they dropped a double overtime game to Anthony Wayne. And you're like, at that point, I think we saw the same thing with Central and Whitmer at various points this year with Perrysburg. It's like they kind of hit those different spots in the seasons where they're maybe, if we're talking about 5 gears, they're kind of stuck in fourth. They're okay. They're pretty good, but they couldn't get that accelerator and really just take off and put teams away consistently. And it cost them a couple ball games. But what they've done since then, they've gotten, they kept their nose to the grindstone. They finished the year, I believe, 3-4 wins in a row and ready for the tournament. Again, that Mansfield Springfield game, it's going to be a good matchup. And if they do, if it's Springfield and St. Francis, look, St. Francis just beat Central. St. John's on Friday in a heck of a ball game. Yeah. They knocked out Central earlier this year. This is a team that's very dangerous because they got guard play, experienced guard play, and they got some length and size inside. It's just a matter of putting it together collectively at the same time. But if they do, they're a very difficult beat. So it's not a walk in the park for Perrysburg for sure.
Absolutely. Let's go move to the City League now. Start was not necessarily dominant, but beat Scott in the City League Championship the third time they played him, the third time they beat him. The highlight of that one, of course, was Romel Hightower's 360 dunk. We saw it a few years ago. Prior to COVID, Deshaun Nelson with Rogers in the tournament threw a 360 dunk down in a tournament game. He's now playing for DePaul, the Blue Demons out of Chicago. Actually was in Cincinnati to watch Xavier host DePaul, so I saw Deshaun Nelson in person. It was good to see him. His game has developed tremendously since he was in a Rogers Rams uniform. But Romel Hightower, one of our top 30 first-team All-BCSN candidates, he has been a pleasure to watch along with Stone Edwards. And Scott put up a valiant effort, but that lockdown defense, I mean, that Start has, and we talked about it before, but they have just prevented teams from scoring, prevented teams from getting second chance opportunities. And when they are locked down, they're holding teams in the 40s.
They are. And you always say, teams take on the personality of their coach, right? And we talked about Matt Wortham and the Start Spartans year in, year out. What do they do best? They sit out on the half court and they grind you down. And they limit you to one shot, which puts then a lot of stress on that one shot to be able to hit it effectively. And you said it, they don't give you second, third chance opportunities. And those scores are in the upper 30s, low 40s consistently, which means they just do one heck of a job. And as you get in the tournament and you play in some of these bigger venues, your offensive numbers tend to go down a little bit anyway. And so then you're playing Start. It's like they're like a boa constrictor. They wrap around you and they squeeze the life out of you. And that's, they're well on their way to doing that again.
Start goes 10-0 in City League play. Then Scott goes 8-2. Third place Bowser, fourth place Rogers, and then Woodward and Waite. And we talked about how Start will take on Southview and then potentially face Whitmer in the district semifinals. Scott could lay a path towards a tournament run. They're a 4 seed in Division II. They'll likely face Port Clinton. They'll face Port Clinton or Clyde in the sectional finals. If they advance out of that, the Scott Bulldogs would likely face Toledo Central Catholic. They're the 1 seed. So we could see a Scott versus Central Catholic matchup there a couple games into the tournament. Let's go to the TAAC now, Rhett. Emmanuel Christian held on to get the overall outright title in the TAAC. They outlasted Cardinal Stritch. Stritch came up short earlier in the season against Maumee Valley Country Day. That loss gave them 2 losses on the season. Emmanuel Christian, despite a split between Emmanuel Christian and Stritch, Emmanuel Christian goes 9-1. They're 19-3 overall. And now that they have clinched that outright league title, they are advancing on to bigger and better things.
And you never want to. There's never, what do they call it? The old moral victories type thing. But them losing to Cardinal Stritch when they did in terms of where it was at in the season, may have been the best thing for them in the regards of it didn't take away the ultimate goal of having a chance to win the TAAC outright, which they were able to do. But it's one of those deals like, look, this is a high pressure situation. We're on the road, big crowd. Obviously, majority of that crowd's against you. You got to lead. The other team makes a run at you, and they were able to beat you. And so it's one of those games where you could really use it as a positive, break it down, what you did well, what you didn't do well, but just say, guys, this can happen if we're all not dialed in and focused on details. This thing can happen to us. It just did. So moving forward, if we're going to accomplish the goals that we want to accomplish here in the postseason, we have to be airtight in all areas. If not, this is what can happen to us. There's proof in the pudding, in terms of, Coach Harris's message to them. So, excuse me, not Coach Harris, to Emmanuel Coach's message to them. It was Coach Harris who knocked them off, but, like proof's in the pudding, it's real results, and you can just learn from it and move on.
Latest state rankings, the final state rankings on the boys' side, Emmanuel Christian tied for 4th in the state in Division 3. Ottawa-Glandorf tied for the number 1 spot in Division 3 with Minford, and then Cardinal Stritch, last state rankings, got in. They were previously not ranked, but got in the 10th spot. They are also 19-3. As I look at the bracket here in Northwest 2 sectional district bracket in Division 3, here's what I'm thinking. I think Emmanuel Christian advances. They're going to have to go through the NWOAL to get out of this district. And we've seen a number of those games played at Central Catholic and the neutral site locations where we've seen the TAAC, whether it's Ottawa Hills or Cardinal Stritch, or in this year, possibly Emmanuel Christian going up against those NWOAL teams like Evergreen, like Archbold, like a Liberty Center, a Swanton. So I think that's going to be the path for Emmanuel Christian if they do want to get out of districts and advance to regionals, where we could see Stritch is in a different bracket. So we could see Emmanuel Christian advance out of the district. We could see Cardinal Stritch advance out of the district. And then I mentioned that number 1 team in the state, Ottawa-Glandorf, they could also be advancing out of district. All 3 of those teams could play a factor in the regionals that are going to be played at the BGSU Stroh Center. So the Stroh Center is fantastic for college basketball. It's fantastic for high school hoops as well. That place is packed. No knock at the Falcons, but there are games in which there's more people at those regional championship and semifinal games than there are for a Tuesday night MAC game.
There's no doubt about it. Now, a few years back when Maumee Valley made their run in the region with Zep Jackson, I was down there calling their game against Convoy Crestview, and it was the whole town was there, and they're all wearing this, the colors and whatnot. It's a heck of an atmosphere. But those 3 you mentioned, Stritch, Emmanuel Christian, and Ottawa-Glandorf, those are 3 heavyweights, and you'd love to see those 3 advance and see what the 4th team is, because that's big time basketball.
All right, let's finish it up on the boys' side with the Northern Buckeye Conference. Rossford has been the target on the back of everyone in the Northern Buckeye Conference, and they have lived up to it. They have earned the outright title to beat Genoa at home. They beat Genoa on the road, and Rossford is the 2 seed in their bracket. In all likelihood, they're going to take on Wauseon in the district semifinals, and then in all likelihood they're going to take on Toledo Central Catholic in the district championship game. So I'm looking forward to that potential matchup. You got Derek Force on the inside, Brendan Revels, you got Jake Morrison on the other side for Central Catholic. You would have Isaiah Brenneman, Makai Leach,
Michael
Greenlee, just a lot of different playmakers, a lot of those players on our top 30 first team all BCSN candidate watch list. But Rossford, it's time to show what you can do. They have dominated in somewhat of an inferior or lesser NBC. We didn't see a ton of teams challenge them at all, and that's a credit to what Rossford brings and puts on the floor each and every Tuesday, Friday, Saturday. But Rossford needs to deliver now in the postseason.
They do, and you said it, because when you look at the body of work coming into this ballgame, take nothing away from them. They handled their schedule. But when you look and say who played the harder schedule, Central Catholic certainly has played a much tougher schedule than Rossford has. So if that matchup does indeed materialize, and you said Rossford's got to get by Wauseon. Wauseon beat Rossford few weeks back. So they got to do that first. And if they do get that Central Catholic matchup, it is very hard in practice to simulate size and quickness with your scout team. And if you don't have that, it takes a quarter and a half in a game to adjust to that, when you do play live. So that is going to be something to watch for if indeed that matchup materializes. Now, with that being said, Central Catholic does not have an answer size-wise for Derek Forrest. He's the difference maker.
Not many people do.
Right. So when you got Greenlee and Brenneman and Mekhi Leach, you say, okay, they can match up with Morris and Revels in Murphy. For roster. So let's just say cancel each other. Then Derek Forrest versus Tywan Clark or, the other guys that Central is going to throw at them. You assume they're going to bring double teams and scramble out of it. It should be a great matchup if indeed that does materialize.
All right, you are watching and/or listening to the BCSN Nation podcast powered by Marco's Pizza. I am Justin Feldkamp alongside Rhett Boyd. Let's switch it over to the girls' side. We are into the postseason. As we tape this podcast right now, we are into the district semifinals within the TRAC. Central Catholic, Fremont, Ross, and Findlay all alive. Notre Dame, St. Ursula, Whitmer, Lima Senior, and Clay have all been eliminated. So any projections that we have made in conjunction with you and/or Deion Thompson on this podcast, all of those projections with the top seeds are all still intact. We still see Central Catholic alive. We still see Fremont Ross. They're going to take on Northview. We also have Findlay taking on Anthony Wayne.
Yeah, I mean, I expect Central to still be alive. You expect Fremont to be alive. Findlay, I think at this point in the bracket, they're where you thought they would be. But the problem for Findlay is they're running up against Anthony Wayne now. And that's going to be a tough matchup for them. But Fremont, they take on Northview. Now, Northview knocked off Whitmer in the last ball game. Northview is the one that upset Fremont last year. Obviously, rosters are a little bit different this year. I expect Fremont to come away with the victory there. And then Central, they play Oak Harbor, and then possibly then after that, Rogers. And that should be a heck of a matchup there.
Yeah, and I think Northview, they have played maybe not necessarily a spoiler role because they've had some good teams in the past. Coach Pat Sayer does a great job there at Northview. Mm-hmm. They had Casey Baumhauer, who was a first-team All-BCSN player a number of years ago, now playing at Wright State after a trip to St. Bonaventure. She transferred down there. But I remember they played a game at Central Catholic, a neutral site game against Notre Dame, when Notre Dame was on its way to the state Final Four, and Northview battled them all the way till the final buzzer. So another portion within the NLL. Let's talk about Northview, Anthony Wayne, Perrysburg, Springfield, and Southview. 5 teams all still alive. Bowling Green, Napoleon, and Maumee have all been eliminated. Perrysburg is going to take on Springfield. I think that's a juicy matchup there. Springfield has the higher seed, but not by much. And we've seen Perrysburg battle everybody they faced in the last second half of the season. And then Southview is going to take on Start. We'll get into Start here in just a moment on the City League side. Yeah,
and I took some time on Saturday, went out and watched the Perrysburg Notre Dame game. Low-scoring game. It was a defensive grind by both teams. You expected that going in, and Perrysburg came away with a 29-28 victory. But when you look at Perrysburg and Springfield, played twice already this year. They split with each other, and I want to say one game for sure was in the 30s, and the other one might have been, low 40s, high 30s type matchup, low-scoring games. These two teams know each other extremely well. Todd Sims' Perrysburg team, we talked about it all year long, how young they were coming into the season. They've gotten seasoned as the year has gone on, and they got players that can score. It was the Gibbs girl. You got Griggs, Callie Thames, the freshman, is really talented, and then you got Wrigley Tackett's on the inside, and she was a rim protector the other night. Several blocks, some key stops inside to thwart some Notre Dame possessions where it looked like they were going to get a good scoring opportunity. So in Springfield, they're built for pressure. They're the one they want to pressure. They want to turn you over between the circles, get some transition layups going. That kind of gets them into their rhythm with Kendall Carruthers and Sigmund and company. So it's going to be a great matchup. It's going to be tempo. Perrysburg wants to slow the tempo down, get into a half court. Springfield wants to, like I said, play between the circles and get some easy buckets off of their defense. So we'll see how that materializes. But these two teams are not going to surprise each other in terms of X's and O's. It's a matter of execution. Yeah,
for Springfield, I'm curious how they come out and are prepared for this game, because they had the goal of winning the Northern Lakes League. Has never been done in Springfield history. They weren't able to accomplish that. They played Anthony Wayne in the tournament last year, came up short. Here's another opportunity for them to get to the district championship by beating a fellow NLL team. And they were disappointed by not being able to win the NLL, but now it's a little redemption time. Okay, put that behind you. but do they allow that difficulty and disappointment to affect how they play within the tournament? They got a job done against a lesser opponent in Sandusky earlier in the tournament, so let's see what they can do there. All right, the City League. Start will face Southview. In the other portion of that, the winner of Perrysburg and Springfield faces the winner of Southview and Start. Coach Dane Franklin has done a tremendous job, just like he did last year. They got a three-headed monster there for the Lady Spartans. I would be shocked if they did not advance against Southview, but Southview has been playing a little bit better with Coach Kelly Heel at the helm there. And then Rogers, also out of the City League, the two teams that are still alive on the girls' side in the City League, Start and Rogers. Rogers will take on Wauseon in Division II with the potential matchup against Central Catholic in the district championship.
Start's one of those teams, and I always kind of put my old coaching hat back on when I look at these teams and try to break them down. It's like, if I'm going against them, how do you feel about it? Type thing. How would you try? And Start's a team I look at and I'm like, God, this is a team you don't want to face, because you talk about the three-headed monster with Douglas,
Sylvester and Sinai Douglas,
and Garrison.
Garrison, yep.
Perimeter. They're all on the perimeter, and they disrupt your offensive rhythm. At the start of your possession, they do not allow you to get into your offense. And those are the teams that are hardest to face when you can't even get into your stuff. And again, you can't simulate that in practice. And then you get into the game, it's an adjustment for your kids. And so in addition to that, they are hungry, and they want to get back to where they were last year and then some. So with Sinai Douglas leading the way on both ends of the floor, we talked about the two counterparts on the perimeter, and they're active and aggressive inside. This is a team that, can really make a deep run again.
And let's wrap up the girls' side of the podcast here with the TAAC. Toledo Christian, from beginning to end, was the favorite. They dominated, just 4 losses so far. They have reached the district semifinals. They're going to take on Gibsonburg, possibly get the winner of Lakota and Woodmore. Woodmore is a co-champion out of the Northern Buckeye Conference. We already saw Fostoria, the co-champion of the Northern Buckeye Conference, lose in their tournament game, so they are done. So Woodmore trying to carry the flag there for the NBC. But Toledo Christian and Kendall Braden, so much talk about her. She is the top 30 candidate, possibly moving on to the top 10 first team all BCSN watch list. But Sammy McConowitz, you know her from your talk of doing color analysis for UT women's games. She came from Rossford. Her senior year, she put the Rossford Bulldogs on her back, and they went on a little bit of a tournament run. I think Kendall Braden, there's some other players. You could pick out the best player from each of the teams that we've been talking about here today and say, okay, here's the challenge, a league or conference player of the year. It's your time to shine. When you're down or your team needs a bucket or needs to maintain possession or needs to knock down a free throw, this is where the cream rises to the top, and this is an opportunity for TC to do what they've set out to do with this difficult schedule, playing Division I teams, not even in just this area, but across the state. They have built the schedule to test them to not just win a district, but to advance in the regionals, advance the state.
You're right. And the building, the building from beginning to end with this schedule, like you said, it's here. It's been done. It's put up or shut up time, right? I mean, it's the time of year for everybody in tournament play. And for Toledo Christian, you're going to take all those experiences that you had this year, with that tough schedule that you played in, and now you're going to put it to, you're going to put it to the test. And you're right. And I'll tell you what, though, if I'm Coach Wensink, I love the fact that I have Kendall Braden on my team, that if I do need a bucket, I got somebody like that I can give the ball to, because I know I'm going to get a good look.
All right, let's go to our last segment here.
It's time for the BCSN Nation Podcast Question of the Week. Send us your question on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook using the @BCSN Sports and #BCSN Podcast.
All right, we won't delve so super deep on this because we already talked about this matchup. Our game of the week, Rhett, Findlay versus Anthony Wayne. Findlay's 15-7, 10-4 in their conference. Anthony Wayne 14-8 overall, 12-2 in their league. This game is at a neutral site. It is at Start High School. So we got the TRAC, we got the NLL head-to-head in our game of the week. Findlay versus Anthony Wayne. Which league is stronger, the TRAC or the NLL?
I'll tell you what, when I first was starting to entertain this question, I was like, oh man, that's like, you're really splitting hairs here. But then I did a little deep dive into it. And I truly believe the TRAC is the better league. And here's why. Bear with me here on this. Central Catholic beat Perrysburg. Whitmer beat Anthony Wayne. St. Francis beat Anthony Wayne. Findlay beat Springfield. Fremont beat Bowling Green. St. John's beat Bowling Green. And so those are all teams in the NLL that were in the top 5, I believe, in the NLL. When you look at the NLL, what they can hang their hat on is Perrysburg beat Whitmer, Springfield beat Fremont, and Northview beat Clay, who's at the bottom of the NLL. So I just think when you top on a given day, anybody can beat anybody. But I think collectively, top to bottom, I think the TRAC is just a little bit stronger. The NLL, I think they have some more explosive, high-powered talent from top to bottom in the league. Not to take anything away from the NLL guys, but I think it's just a little bit deeper.
Yeah, if you take a look at the Martin RPIs that are being utilized in Northwest Ohio for this season in conjunction with the OHSA, in Division I, Region 1, if you look at the top 20 teams in Division I, Region 1, there's 4 TRAC teams and 3 NLL teams. From spots 21 to 40, you got 3 TRAC teams and 3 NLL teams. So that doesn't encapsulate every single team, 8 and 8 from each conference or league, but it does give you a little bit of indication that, yes, I would agree with you that the TRAC has an edge, but it's really not by much. And I'm curious, I know at this point in the season, if you're watching the men's or women's NCAA tournament come March, you always see, okay, what is a league or conference's record after the first weekend or after the second weekend or when it's all said and done? How did the Big 12 or ACC or Big 10 play throughout the entirety of it? I am kind of curious to keep track of, okay, how many teams in the TRAC are still alive come regional time? How many teams from the NLL are still alive come regional time?
Yeah, and I think, obviously a couple teams there. You're going to find out about it this weekend for sure with the Anthony Wayne-Findlay matchup. I mean, that's number 1 in the NLL versus number 3 in the TRAC, and I think that's a true litmus test.
Gotcha. Okay, all right. We are out of time here on the BCSN Nation podcast powered by Marco's Pizza. Check out all of our social media platforms because we have a ton of games on our air on the BCSN Now app between now and really mid-March. So just take a look at our social media platforms. Watch Sports Nightly. We'll get you up to date on all the games that we're going to be broadcasting. Rhett and Dion and Joel will have all of it Fridays on Game Day Nation and Game Day Nation Overtime. Live look-ins this Friday. We're going to need 16 monitors to watch anything and everything. There's so many games from the Toledo and or Sandusky area. So it's going to be a fantastic basketball watching time. For Rhett, I am Justin. Thank you for watching the BCSN Nation podcast powered by Marco's Pizza.